Go online now. Okay, the meeting is now live. Good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Housing Scrutiny Committee meeting. My name is Councillor Pounds, and I'm chair of this committee meeting taking place at 5:30 on Tuesday, the 21st of November, 2023. For tonight's meeting, we've received apologies from Councillor Lee, and Councillor Porra is attending as an alternate. Councillor Swift is also present in place of Councillor Wade, who is no longer a member of the Housing Scrutiny Committee, as she is now an executive councillor for communities. I'll now call names, and if you could answer, please. Are you present, Councillor? Councillor Griffin?
Present.
Councillor Holloway?
Present.
Martinelli?
Present.
Porra?
Present, Chair.
Pounds? Robertson? He's given his apologies that he'll be a little late. Thank you. Councillor Swift?
Present.
Councillor Titalavaki?
Present, Chair.
Councillor Tong?
Here.
And the Executive Councillor for Housing and Homelessness, Councillor Bird.
Present.
And we would also like to welcome the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, which is Councillor Smith. Welcome.
Present, thank you.
For our tenants' representatives, Christabella and Amitai and Diane Best are attending the meeting virtually. Welcome. I hope you can hear us okay.
Present, yes. Thank you.
Present, yes.
Thank you. That means that you can participate, but you may not vote. Officers and public speakers will join us throughout the course of the meeting, and I'll introduce them at the start of the relevant agenda items. Also in attendance is Diana Minns, who is the tenant representative. Welcome. And Mandy Powell-Hardy.
Here.
Thank you very much. So some housekeeping, please, before we kick off. Please could I advise members of the public that only public entrance exit from the Guildhall for committee meetings is the Pease Hall entrance, please. This can be accessed from the rear of the council chamber. So out through that door, turn right and use either the lift or the stairs to return to the ground floor where you can exit the building. The meeting procedure is that the committee will receive an oral presentation from officers. Members of the committee will then discuss the report and vote on the recommendations. Tenant and leaseholder representatives will participate in the debates on all agenda items, but may only vote on items in part 1 of the agenda. Part 1 of the agenda will be chaired by my colleague Diana here, the tenant representative, and I will chair part 2 of the agenda. Following the vote of the committee, the executive councillor as the decision maker will be asked if they agree the decision. I've exercised my discretion to take a part 2 agenda item first. This is listed on the agenda as item 5, report on redevelopment scheme at East Barnwell. Now moving on to agenda item 2, please could committee members advise if they have any declarations of interest and identify which agenda item their declaration relates to. Councillor Tong?
Hey, in relation to the East Barnwell redevelopment, Abby Peoples mentioned, and I'd probably want to discuss them. So I will say I've done a bunch of work in the past with them, and a bunch of councillors, including myself, were invited to their 10th anniversary gala recently. So that's something to note.
Thank you very much. Councillor Porra?
Hello, just to note that I also sit on planning committee. So my comments tonight will be relating to the HRA and the budgetary implications of this site, and will have no bearing on any, obviously, planning things that may come up in the future relating to scale and massing and the local plan requirements. I just wanted to make that clear, as I did, because we had a planning briefing on this morning as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And any other declarations of interest? No, I think that's all. So we move on to agenda item 3, which are the minutes of the meeting on the 19th of September 2023. Are there any comments, or may we approve them? And thank you very much for very comprehensive minutes, very detailed. No, I think everybody's happy. So the minutes of the last meeting are approved. And now we move on to agenda item 4, which is public questions. This lasts for an overall time period of 30 minutes. The new public speaking rules, which were agreed at the October Full Council, provide that members of the public send their text of their public question in advance of the meeting. The text of the question will no longer be read out, as it will be published in advance of the meeting. And I understand that there are copies on your chairs if you have not yet seen it. Then the Executive Council or Officer has 2 minutes to provide a response. Public speakers then have an opportunity to ask a follow-up question for up to 2 minutes, and the Executive Council or Officer may respond as appropriate for up to 2 minutes. And the committee manager will advise when the time periods are up. What we normally do is give you a warning bell 30 seconds before the end of your time so that you know to wrap up comfortably. So the first question this evening, Dr. Chiodo, would you like to introduce yourself and advise if you're speaking on behalf of a group?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dr. Maurice Chiodo. I'm a resident of Eakin Road in Cambridge, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Save Eakin Road group. You have the question statement, which has been circulated to all of you early this evening.
Thank you. So if everybody has seen the public questions, I'd like to ask the Executive Councillor, Councillor Bird, for a response, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everybody. Okay, for question 1, which says, that the work with us, the residents, to revise the options being investigated for the estate before more money is wasted on investigatory work that will ultimately lead to nowhere. So my answer is, I have worked with ward councillors, officers on reviewing the Eakin Road estate. As the Exec Councillor for Housing, I've worked with all the councillors in bringing forward the review on Eakin Road. As you know, there has been an independent survey and communications company have knocked on every door to get feedback from all residents. We will be publishing the results of the survey, but I can tell you that the headlines are: valid survey responses are returned from over half of the households on Eakin Road estate. Over half of these households support the redevelopment of the estate. This survey will be made available on the website in advance of the next residents' liaison group meeting. 3/4 of the residents have had engagement with council officers, and councillors have attended consultations, and I personally have made the offer to visit any resident who may be concerned about their view. Number 2 was that you gain an understanding of how many residents wish to be rehoused locally and a plan to obtain such housing before deciding on any options for the estate. Remember, we haven't approved anything yet on Eakin Road, but when there is a proposal for redevelopment, council officers take into account how many residents may have to move out. Consideration is given to how much time will be needed, whether there are new council homes being built nearby or what individual needs will be. The council has considerable experience in working with tenant and leasehold households throughout the moving process. If East Barnwell is approved by the committee, then this may be a move option for tenants if redevelopment is approved at Eakin Road. The council also has a significant number of properties in the Barnwell area. However, the survey has highlighted that many Eakin Road residents do not wish to remain and will be seeking properties elsewhere in Cambridge. We provide assistance for leaseholders, freeholders who are looking to purchase a new home in the city by working with partners to identify possible opportunities. Question 3, that you immediately cease any investigatory work on options which require the seizure of freehold properties. As such, options will become impossible for you to carry out. The 2 redevelopment options do look at possible purchase of freehold and leasehold properties. The council has undertaken CPOs that have been confirmed by the Secretary of State. To the council's credit, in recent years, it hasn't been necessary to evict anyone from their homes. This is part of the council's successful record of purchasing homes through litigation. If redevelopment is approved at Eakin Road, then the council will work with homeowners to reach a solution. There are very clear regulations on the CPO that protect homeowners and the council.
Councillor Bird, under the new regulations, the response should have lasted 2 minutes, and I've obviously appreciated the detailed response, which I think is welcomed by the group. But if you could perhaps not read the last question, but just sum up, that would be great.
All right.
So if you could just read your response for question 4, because we have it written here. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that. Okay, so question 4 you've already read. I attended the initial consultation event and I've been following developments closely. I'll be attending the next Eakin Road Liaison Group meeting. And question 5, everyone's read, executive councillors have full confidence in the team of officers and partners, and we have developed a significant track record of managing estate regeneration projects. They have experience in taking more than 800 council homes through the planning process. Over 100 households have been helped to move to enable those in additionally to those highly substantial homes. The council have provided new shops, 4 new community centres and other community facilities such as preschool, new parks and play areas. And I will also add that I am meeting up with some of the residents of Eakin Road on Saturday. And as everybody in this committee knows, I'm committed on trying to get as many homes built for our residents of this city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. Dr. Chiodo, would you like to ask a supplementary question?
I would, and to follow up on what Councillor Bird has said.
You have 2 minutes.
Is that the same 2 minutes Councillor Bird had, or was it 2 minutes?
Well, we have new regulations, and obviously they're going to take a little bit of time to bed in. I assume that you would like to hear a response to your detailed questions, as you asked 5 questions.
Yes, thank you. So, thank you, Councillor, for your response. In our request for you to work with residents, I think it's important to realise that we're in sort of 18 months into this process now, and the residents really haven't seen much of the councillors in this. To say that there's 5 degrees of separation between the company doing the survey and councillors now. It goes councillors to executive officer to council officers to JLL to Marengo to the houses, to the homes. Even to say that every door was knocked on, that's not to say that every household has been consulted. I spoke to a household last Sunday night at 6 p.m. who had no idea that there was a survey happening. I needed to inform them of how they would fill out their survey. So knocking on every door is not the same as engaging with every household. There is a difference there. And there is some rule that's been set by, I don't know who, whether this is the council itself or Marengo, who have said that it is one sort of voice, one vote per household rather than per person. Normally, when we make important decisions, we do this by person. For example, when voting for new councillors or a government, it's not 1 per household, it's 1 per person. So there's no clarity as to why it's been set out that the vote is 1 per household rather than 1 per person. Council, I'd like to ask if the council has ever successfully carried out a compulsory purchase order on a freehold property for residential redevelopment, or indeed if it's ever issued or even tried to acquire a freehold property for redevelopment. My understanding is that you haven't actually done this for freeholds yet. And the East Balmoral project, if it is to be used, is over 5 years away from completion. to have housing for the Eakin Road residents. That is quite a long time away. I don't know what council plans to do in the interim. In regards to having full faith in your officers, which I'm sure that you do, I would like to remind council that the officers received their first decision notice by the ICO a few weeks ago. They're not able to fully apply and properly apply freedom of information law. Now, if the officers have struggled with something like that, then are they well equipped to be able to process something like compulsory purchase orders, which are significantly more complicated than freedom of information requests and more complicated area of law? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bird, would you like to answer? Or, yeah, you want, yeah, thank you.
Chair, I'm going to ask our officer, Ben Binns, if he could just answer the one about the FOI and also about the freehold house. And I'll come back.
Yes, excuse me, certainly. So on the FOI, the documents have now been released, as you're aware. The documents that are released, one has already been on the website for some considerable time. The other document we didn't think was of particular interest or material benefit to your understanding, which was the Crown Commercial Services Procurement document. We checked with the ICO which documents they wanted to be released, and those were the documents they told us that should be released, and that's what we've done. As far as we're concerned, the matter is now closed on that particular FOI question. If you do have a concern, you need to now address that with the ICO. Regarding freehold and leaseholds and purchase of properties, the council has experience with CPOs. There have been CPOs that have been accepted by the Secretary of State. The CPO process is long and also protracted, and many steps in between from the very start to the very end. And of course, the council has to seek legal advice to ensure that whatever process it takes, it is robust. And that's what we have done. However, we're very proud that we've never had to fully enact the CPO because we have, in the end, negotiated with the homeowner to a satisfactory conclusion where we've purchased through negotiation.
Thank you very much, Ben. And Councillor Bird, if you'd like to sum up for us, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The knocking on door, one person, I think because in a household, it's easier if you can talk to one person and get that information from that householder, and then you've got all the information you would need. If we went round every single person in the house, it would take months and months. And on the other bit about, because it may take 5 years for East Barnwell, we're not sure how long East Barnwell will take to be done. And we haven't made no decisions on Eakin Road, so it could be 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, before we even make a decision on Eakin Road. So until we go through everything, all the consultations, speak to your residents of Eakin Road, then we can look at seeing where we go from there. Them 3 options. But nothing has been decided yet. No sign properly has been decided. So as soon as we know anything, of course, Eakin Road residents will know. I hope that helps.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. So that concludes that public question. I'd just like to say that 2 separate questions were submitted to Housing Scrutiny Committee regarding antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour matters, however, these questions have not been accepted to be discussed tonight, as this is not the appropriate committee or forum in which to discuss issues, as they are potentially sensitive and contain personal data and information relating to potential legal proceedings. So these questions will be handled, but they will be handled under the Council's complaints procedure. So thank you. That now concludes our question time. So Thank you very much for joining us this evening and for the public question. You are very welcome to carry on and for the rest of the meeting if you would like to, but if you would like to leave, as I said, it's through that door to the right and downstairs. I'll just give a couple of minutes for our visitors if they would like to leave before we proceed. If everybody's ready, then we'll resume the meeting. So we turn now to agenda item 5, which is a report on the redevelopment scheme at East Barnwell. And for this, there are 2 recommendations for the committee. One is to the Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources, Councillor Smith, and one is to the Councillor for Housing and Homelessness, Councillor Bird. So who do we have? It's welcome to Jim Pollard. You're to speak on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The report, I'm not going to attempt to go through it in sort of page by page or anything like that. The report is a culmination of many years of discussion in East Barnwell about regeneration. It is, as you will know, one of the more deprived areas of the city, and indeed features on kind of national assessments of deprivation. And so it is a priority for the council to address needs in this area, and it's an area which hasn't for really many years now. And so this is why we have been working over the last few years, initially through work funded by One Public Estate, to bring partners together to deliver a regeneration project for the centre of this area, which we hope will encourage other developments to come forward and make a really positive contribution to the area as a whole, particularly as we're going to see new developments on the margins of this area as the airport moves away, and that's already happening, of course, at Marley. And what I've seen in many situations is that areas neighbouring such developments can be very much left behind by those kinds of edge of city developments. We did a big consultation exercise in connection with the One Public Estate work. We found that there was not only a lot of support for doing something about the area, but also a sense of consultation fatigue when it's something actually going to happen, because we've gone around this route a few times. So what I think is one of the really important things about this process is the amount of coming together that's been involved, and it includes this council, the county council, the GCP, but also a lot of groups in the area. Abbey people obviously are very active in the area, but also the Bowls Club, the Seesaw, the preschool, many different groups in the area have been involved in discussions about all of this. So that's how we have managed to get to a point where we've got really quite an ambitious scheme for starting the regeneration of Barnwell by focusing on these 3 sites in the centre of the area, which will really be a vibrant new centre for the community in an area which is very much dominated by traffic and roundabout, and the buildings have all retreated from it, and it's not a positive situation at the moment. That was why the committee accepted the report framework change a year ago. Since then, we've been doing a lot of work to get to the point where we could think in terms of a planning application for these sites. I think probably the key thing to address, especially given the financial pressures the council is facing, is to understand where we have got to with that, because it's probably the key thing that's moved and that people will be concerned about this evening. The situation a year ago was that we were looking to have the scheme funded through development. Build cost movements have been really very marked since that assessment was made and not really been compensated for by value movements. We've also looked quite a lot at the funding issues around this scheme. And we have come to the view that the way to get the scheme delivered is in fact to bring forward an affordable scheme, a mixture of social rented homes and kind of intermediate 80% rent homes, which we have established in other work there's a real need for in the city. So it will produce on these two sites, the two central sites, 120 new affordable homes, and the great majority of this is gain. There are 18 homes on the site at the moment, and only 10 of those are currently council homes, so it's 110 new additional council homes that we'll get from this process, so that's a big plus. Part of this is that we will, to support the general fund's contribution to this, which of course is significant, we will need to develop and sell homes on the existing community centre site when it transfers from county. In terms of the county's contribution, they're making the contribution of £500,000. We looked at that quite a lot at the time. What we have looked at since then is how's this working out. We think that overall this is still a reasonable situation, because what we're also going to do is retain the community centre and library area in the ownership of the City Council. Of course, the library will be leased to the county for the purposes of the library, but we will be retaining that, and we've had the value of these properties, and overall we are happy that that's a reasonable situation with the county council, and so that's why the finances are looking as they are. And what I would urge you to do is to recognise that even though it's not an easy time, these opportunities are very, very hard to create. They don't come easily, and it's really important to take them when they're there. And so I commend it to you.
Thank you very much, Jim. That's very helpful. And I would like to commend the officers on what is a really complex but very, very exciting project. We will be moving on to members' questions now, and I had one, so if you're okay, I'll go ahead first. It was to do with Site 3, because on the maps it's quite clear where Sites 1 and Sites 2 are, but not where Site 3 is. And I would also like to ask if you have any kind of idea yet as to what you intended for Site 3. So if you could just clarify where it is.
Yes,
that would be
okay.
great.
So, well, I won't try, obviously not possible to produce a map, but if you're broadly familiar with the area, the roundabout, commonly known as the McDonald's roundabout at the moment, is where these two sites are on each side of Barnwell Road. South of Newmarket Road, if you go out of town along Newmarket Road, you go past Christ the Redeemer Church, and then you get to what is the existing community centre site, and that's where Site 3 is. So it's just along from Barnwell Road going out of town on the same side as Newmarket Road, if that's clear. The proposals for it are not as advanced as the proposals for Sites 1 and 2. They'll form a separate planning application, and they will probably be something like 9 houses for sale, something of that order.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members' questions? So we have Councillor Griffin, we have Councillor Tong.
Thank you for that. I'm just wondering on point 1.11, you mentioned the 9 million from Homes England. Do we have a plan B if that doesn't come through?
We would have to reassess it if it doesn't come through, and we'd have to look at market conditions at the time and possibly revise things accordingly. We have developed a strong relationship with Homes England. We've had a lot of discussions with them about this scheme. We did have a lot of discussions about whether they would put in separate infrastructure funding in. In the end, they said they couldn't do that without going back to the department, and they didn't want to do that given their experience of negotiating that with the department on other issues. But what they did say is that they would therefore do what they could to help us on the approved development programme, which is where this funding comes from, which is their regular programme. So we have a reasonable level of confidence that that will be forthcoming. My experience over many, many years of dealing with Homes England and its predecessors is that that's as good as it gets until you're really looking at a scheme and you're saying, here it is. And so I think we need to proceed on that basis, really.
Thank you. And Councillor Tong?
I'll admit I was going to make a very similar point to Councillor Griffin, and I believe Councillor Poor as well. I guess I'll just take the opportunity to say thank you for your hard work on this. It's really, really exciting for the community, especially because I engage with a lot of people who absolutely need these amenities. It's taken a long time. You know, you can look at, for example, the appendix to the most recent Environment Community meeting to see how long it's taken, but I'm really excited about it, and I guess I'll just leave it there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Poor, did you want to add anything? And then also Diane online would like to speak.
Thank you very much. Yeah, just to echo my slight concern about the Homes England grant, because it's not actually in the risk register, which is, I think, probably what we've all picked up. And my feeling is it probably should be in there. I know, obviously, we hope that they will come forward with it, but we are going to be the best part of 10 million short if they don't. So, again, I don't know if officers want to add anything. So I had a couple more comments. In terms of the use of the money, so not talking about planning here, I noticed we've got quite a few single aspect homes. We know that the life expectancy, as you might say, of a single aspect home with the climate change is challenging. So I wonder if officers could respond a little bit about why we've decided that, because we don't really want to have a stranded asset sort of a couple of decades down the line when we're hitting temperatures well above what the government asked us to sort of specify. I think 30 degrees, we're looking towards 40 now. And again, I don't know if officers would comment, this is a project that is entirely amber or red rated. I do understand the financial difficulties, but again, I just note my concerns there. I would prefer to see at least 1 or 2 greens in there. So I don't know if officers could add anything about that. Also, the letting rate. So we're doing 40% at 40% of normal rent, and then we're doing 60% at 80%. So that's broadly 38 at the lowest and the remainder at the highest. I just wondered, obviously I appreciate with different funding models these things have to change, potentially, but could officers just explain how this would differ from previous sites? So, you know, ironworks, timberworks, where I think we were on a much higher proportion at the lower rate. And finally, again, we have quite a lot of parking areas. I would really like to see developments where residents don't have to pay to buy a car unless they absolutely have to. So again, if officers might want to comment about things like having cargo bike parking and all those kind of areas that I think are important for the HRA to be sustainable for our residents to continue to afford to live in Cambridge and, you know, incentivise public transport use, but also we don't want people having the expense of the car if they don't need it, if they could alternatively get a bike, for example, or use a mobility scooter. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Porat. Jim, would you like to respond, please?
Yeah, I'll try and pick up all different points. And please prompt me if I miss some. I think on the risk register, I think that the point about the risk related to Homes England is probably a fair comment. I think we need to more, if you're looking at risk more generally, I think it's prudent to think about risks fairly cautiously at this stage. The scheme's not got planning at this stage. I think, having said that, I think we've done a great deal of work with the planning officers in pre-application discussions. We've done a great deal of community consultation. So that there are significant mitigations of the risk, but it's probably quite cautious in that respect. On the single aspect homes, we have done, these are not easy sites to manage. There's a lot of constraints on them and a lot of ask on them in terms of what we're trying to do. So we have been doing everything we possibly can to avoid single aspect homes, and they are a minority. We've pushed the number down to under a third, and well, probably under a quarter actually. And I think that we've avoided north-facing single aspect homes. So I think we're probably thinking that's as good as that aspect is going to get. On the rents policy issue, what is happening has happened on a lot of the other developments is that we have followed the council's policy for affordable homes, which is 60% of median market rents. So this is different to that. We've tried this on development up in Arbury at L2, which is just coming through. We haven't let those yet, but that's our first one, which we've done like this. What we are delivering in terms of social housing is 40%, which of course is the normal planning requirement for all forms of affordable housing at social rent, and then the balance, rather than being market housing, will be at 80% of median market rent. So and what we think is positive about this approach is that we know we have households who, if they're not on benefits, because of course that's a cap on rents, but if they're not on benefits, if we're going to support people on low incomes who are not on benefits, it's really important that we do have properties at the lower social rents. That's one side of it, and they typically work out at sort of 40-45% of a market rent. They're not a set percentage, but that's where they tend to work out. And then we also know that there are many people who are very important to Cambridge economy and to the life of the city who need good housing. They can't afford the market rents, and that's obviously a problem of availability as well, but they can't. But 80% is something that's within their reach. And so this becomes quite a good mix, we're thinking. We're obviously having to go carefully with how widespread we apply this and see how we go. As I say, we've got one scheme where we're doing this, and this scheme will come forward in phases. So again, we'll see how we go with phase one. But we're thinking this is a very positive approach on the rent side. Parking is a difficult one. Every time we do a consultation, parking will have a lot to say about on both sides of that particular issue. We have got the parking level down to under 0.5. It's 4 and a bit on both sites in terms of the residents' parking. There's some parking for the community facilities and for the commercial units, but we've got it down to 4 and a bit. We've got to think, particularly in terms of phase one, about the impact on Rawling Close, and the street which is to the south of that development. And so we've thought that that's a reasonable compromise on where we are on the parking. We are, of course, it's fair to say, also taking parking out because at the Abbey Leisure Centre, the overflow car park is where the bowling green is going. And we have done studies on that, and we think that the Abbey Leisure Centre will be functioning fine without that additional car parking. So some car parking is coming out there as well.
Thank you very much. Can I ask Diane online if you would like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I have a comment and then the question. My comment is how much we appreciate our membership of the Housing Development Agency Consultation Working Group, which really enables us to deal with some of the practical issues on behalf of the tenants and leaseholders. My question is about biodiversity, which is referred to on page 28, 3.4.2. How is the net gain, in this case 20%, calculated?
Thank you very much. Would you like to take that, Jim? Yes, thank you.
Well, I'd have to supply you separately with the details of the calculation because we basically employ consultants to both assess the biodiversity now and to assess what we can deliver across any new site. The biodiversity of existing sites is often easy to misread. Large areas of grass, for instance, are not particularly biodiverse. And so one of the things that we can look at in a scheme like this, and I would think this is, if you looked at the detailed calculation, you'd see this was important to it, is that because we will have sustainable urban drainage schemes, we will have rain gardens, and they will have all sorts of planting in those. We've been thinking quite a lot about how we will lay out the open space because at the moment it's closed off and is largely just grass. We've obviously looked very carefully at keeping some of the key trees around. There are some very fine trees along Barnwell Road itself that people will be familiar with, but there's also the cherry trees where Rawling Close comes to Barnwell Road. There's trees around the entrance to the Stepneys. There's the ginkgos on Newmarket Road. So we're keeping key groups of trees. The ones that are going tend to be some very small recent fruit trees that were planted. So we're doing pretty well on the trees. Some hedgerows are going, but actually we've got quite a lot of opportunities to plant new hedgerows. There's a separate measure within biodiversity net gain calculation for hedgerows, and there's actually some good opportunities to plant new hedgerows as well as we're keeping. So we're pretty confident that, well, we're very confident we'll hit the 20%. We're trying to see how much we can do beyond that, but so the commitment is to the 20%.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very welcome news, I think, because as Cambridge grows and becomes more and more densely built, the green spaces and the biodiversity are going to be really critical to people's health. So we have Councillor Swift. You would like to answer a question, I please, and then Diana, yes. And then I think Martin.
Yeah. I'm particularly interested about the redevelopment proposals for the food hub in East Barnwell, which I've had a long association with Rachel Carnegie and the Abbey People Food Hub in East Barnwell. And I'm a bit concerned in 3.6.3 on page 29, at the end of page 29, it says there have also been preliminary discussions about the future of the food hub, which is operating on a temporary basis out of the building that previously housed the preschool on Site C. It's a really awful building and it really does need redeveloping. But my question is, I'd just like to clarify which space will be in place for the people in East Barnwell after the current food hub premises close. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Would you like to take that, please, Jim?
Yeah, what's happening about the food hub is that this appeared in the period that we've been doing the development, and we had been talking to Abbey people about what will happen about the food hub. The first thing to say is that the commitment is to delivering Site 1, which is the site west of Barnwell Road first. So there is time to work out a plan for the food hub, if you see what I mean. We're not going to need to move on to the community centre site immediately because it will follow on from the delivery of the new community centre on Site 1. So there is time to work that out. we have people in our community services team who are working with them on this issue in terms of what the business model for the food hub going forward could be. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think the thinking is that it's not going to carry on exactly like it is indefinitely, that there's going to be a different form of business plan, and the question will be, therefore, how does it finance premises for itself? What there isn't within this is scheme, and I'll be quite clear about that, is there isn't simply free premises for the food hub going forward, but there is the note in the report is somewhat abbreviated, but there is behind that quite a lot of work going on. The Shared Prosperity Fund, we got a bit of money through that, and that's helping support this idea of developing a business plan so that we can see what the way forward might be for the food hub.
Excuse me, Chair, can I just ask a little bit more? Can I just ask the officer? Yeah, with the East Barnwell Food Hub, we've just started this thing called a social supermarket, where you have £1, £2 and £3 for different categories of items, and I think that might be part of the business model that might feed into that, but I'm not absolutely sure. But there's lots of new initiatives that are actually being worked out within the food hub. Thank you.
Well, I'll pass that. Just to say, I will pass that back to my colleagues who are working with them, because, as I say, I'm not dealing with that personally. It's not my area, is it?
So that was a recent development that came through from the Environment and Communities Committee. So if you would need to know more information about it, it's a really excellent new initiative that's coming forward that the new Executive Councillor will be able to give you on that, yeah. Diana next.
Oh, mine was about
And then Martin.
single aspect homes and all that, and the fact that the new builds, I live in a new build, they're lovely, but they're very warm in the summer. I'm told for future planning issues, there will have to be stuff included that will mitigate some of that heat in the summer. And I just want to seek reassurance that, I don't know what it is, and I don't want the change in regulations, but it's really important to do that. I mean, I have a lovely, warm home, very cheap to heat, the air source heat pump, but it's warm in the summer. And those people who do only have a single aspect, and there are certainly some on ironworks, do struggle, and I do think that is something that we can't do much about, but I'm welcome the chance that it'll be in the new developments that we're doing from now on in, I presume, yeah? I just want to seek a reassurance on that, not just for the environment, but just for the people living in the flats we're developing, yeah? And I also want to just echo what Diane said about that she and I and Mandy are involved in the Housing Development Agency sort of consultation group, and I would like to praise the officers that are involved in that, because we've seen how much consultation they've done on every single scheme so far, and I think it's been very good. And you're also trying to convey to people very complicated concepts, and you have to put certain things in a certain way in a letter, and I think they generally manage to get it, and they will run them past us, and if we think they don't look readable, we'll tell them. Isn't that right? And I think that's important to get us as resident reps and tenants on the ground involved at every stage of this. And then we call it sort of resident involvement. We also call it, there's other words actually a little bit more popular now, called co-production, which I think we should be having co-production as a principle through everything in the council. That's just my opinion. And I think that, you know, you might find it's really useful to get us involved earlier on in when you're designing things, because some of us will note things that you may not be aware of. And we're also aware of what living in these homes is like. That's just my little statement. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. That's very, very useful feedback. Thank you. So we're Councillor Martinelli, Councillor Robertson, and that will then conclude.
Thank you. So I just wanted to build upon the questions we've already had about the Homes England grant and the nature of the affordable housing that we're building. If we were to, say, not get the Homes England grant, presumably one of the solutions, as we've seen in this committee in the recent past, would be to vary the composition of the housing we're providing, particularly removing socially rented homes, replacing those with intermediate rental homes or even market homes. Do you foresee that this is something that is this a direction the scheme could move in, were the Homes England grant not obtained? And if so, what scrutiny would there be around that kind of decision making?
We have presented reports in the past where we put options in reports. We haven't done that in this case. So the simple answer to your question about what scrutiny there would be is it would have to come back to this committee because there's no option for that written into this report. As I indicated earlier, I think we're confident about the situation with Homes England. It is true that it's a risk, but we're confident about that. I think it's impossible really to anticipate where we would be at the point where that challenge arose, because we would have to look with absent any funding at market housing on the site and think more in terms of more conventional market development and how to make that work. But as I say, we would have to bring that back. If that was the situation, we wouldn't be able to simply crack on in that way under the authorisations in this report.
Let's come back, yes.
Next, can I just clarify how that sits with recommendation 2.2, which authorises the Assistant Director in consultation with the exec to approve variations in the scheme?
My view of that really is that we put that provision in because we understand that there will always be marginal changes to the nature of the scheme, the size, the tenure and so on. That it doesn't stay really as fixed as what we've presented in the report. So I think I would say that we would see a kind of wholesale situation where this wasn't the all affordable scheme as indicated, as out with that recommendation really. So maybe that's some clarification that gives you some comfort on that point really.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Robertson.
Thank you. My main points are not to do with the housing, but before we go on to that, 120 new homes we're going to get out of this project. 120 more families can be housed, or households can be housed. And that's a great credit to us that we've taken the initiative on this sort of thing, and hope we will get the grant, but if it doesn't come through, we'll review it. But you have to take these sort of decisions if you want to have the sort of initiative that we've got in our way of our housing programme. Now, I wanted to ask about the 9 homes planned for plots 3, or site 3. It's a very small number for quite a large plot. Is that really all that can be developed on there? I know it's for private, but they expect to have larger plots, presumably. But it does seem it should be more. And the other question is, if it is more, and there's a requirement to have affordable, some of them to be affordable, and it's a separate planning application, is that a problem or a potential problem?
A couple of points there. As far as the capacity of the site goes, the way we've looked at it as a kind of high-level analysis of that site was simply what could we do with that site that would maximise the return to the general fund to offset the cost the general fund is facing on the scheme. There might be other options as to what we could do with the site, and we will look at the options in more detail, but that was at the high level that we looked at it, the one that produced the best result in terms of a return to the general fund. So that was what happened there. On the question of affordable, of course, if we could get to the point where we would pass affordable housing thresholds and have to provide affordable housing. What we will not be able to do because of Homes England funding rules is to point to the affordable housing we're providing on the other sites and say, therefore, we shouldn't have to. Because the moment we make that kind of link, they will say, well, we're not funding it then.
Is that an argument for having one planning application for both sites then?
No, really, it's an argument for keeping them separate, because if we put them in one planning application, then they would say, but you've got market housing in this site, so we're not funding it. What happened, just for people's understanding, is about 12 years ago, the Housing Corporation, as it then was, took the view that putting their funding into mixed tenure sites was simply feeding through into land value. And they said, we're not going to do it. And ever since then, they've been not doing it. So you put market housing on a site, they won't put their grant into it.
I can see their point. Another issue I have is to do with the shops, what they call commercial units in your report. In 3.6.2, that's talking about the possibility of keeping continuity of shops. It's all written from the point of view of the commercial tenant, the retailer. What about the local shops for the local people? It's not just this site that these shops provide for. It's the whole of that area is their local shopping centre. I do think some sort of continuity is imperative. So can we have some more guarantees rather than just saying, well, possibly?
We have an issue about guarantees in relation to what the shopkeepers will do, I guess, and also in terms of the suitability of the units that we have, which we're currently using down at Culver Road for the actual shopkeepers and uses that they've got. The issue with the chemists will be about security in relation to they hold. Fast food can be an issue in those premises. So we've got some issues there. We are providing a commercial unit within phase one, so we can give some thought to how that is used. I think there's an aspiration for it to be a cafe amongst local people, but we'll have to see about, I think we're supportive of that, but we'll have to see, but it may be that it gets used in a different way short term. There are a lot of different options that we need to look at, really. I think that stops short of a guarantee, but I think we're very mindful that this is an issue, really, both for the leaseholders, the shopkeepers, as it were, and for the community.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would just like to add my own word to that, because I think when you think of how much the people in the east area of Cambridge are putting up with in order that we can achieve these new houses and that the city can expand in the way that it's obviously expected to expand, I think it is very important that we do consider the needs of the local residents and the residents who are there at the moment. Thank you. Now, I'd like to proceed to the vote now, please. It's a little complicated. So first of all, we have recommendations for the Executive Councillor for Housing, and this is page 23, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 and 2.6. Is the committee happy that we take all those votes in one? Yes, thank you. In which case, can I ask please, who is in favour of the recommendations 2.1 to 2.6?
Sorry, Chair, that is unanimous.
That's very good. Thank you very much. And may I now ask the Executive Council for Housing and Homelessness if they will accept the recommendations of the committee?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And then we also have recommendations to our visiting Executive Councillor for Finance and Resources. And these are 2.7 on page 24, 2.8, 2.9 and 2.10. And there is just a briefing, 2.11, for the Executive Councillor. Is the committee happy that we take all those in one vote? Yes. Good. So may I ask, please, who's councillors in favour of the recommendations?
Chair, that's unanimous in favour as well.
And can I ask the Executive Councillor for Finance if he accepts the committee's recommendations?
I do, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Good. So, are we all happy to continue now to item 6? Yes, without a break, thank you. So I'll hand over to my colleague Diana now, who will be chairing this part of the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Pounds. Can I also note we've got 2 new people at this meeting, or either online, I think, and I don't know if we mentioned them earlier. I've written it down because I'm not very good at memory of these things. We've got the Samantha Shimon, who's our new Assistant Director of Housing and Homelessness. I don't think she's been, has she been to a previous committee? No, so I think she's here online under a... I didn't see you, I couldn't see you down there anyway. I'm welcome, and I know it's for the council, but I thought I'd welcome you because no one had mentioned it. And also the the Director of Communities, Sam Schaaf, is also here as well. I mean, we met him for the first time last week, so I thought I'd just mention it, that they were here. Thank you very much. Okay, well, now I'm going to do the well, it's all serious, this meeting, isn't it? But the particularly complicated and the serious one is the report that Julia Havels is going to introduce, item 6 on the agenda, which is the financial report, the medium-term financial strategy. So, Julia, would you like to introduce this item?
Thank you, Chair. The HRA Medium-Term Financial Strategy is one of 2 reports that we bring to you every year to provide an update in relation to the financial forecasts and the proposals for future budgets for the HRA. The Medium-Term Financial Strategy normally comes to you in September, but it's been delayed until November of this year to enable us to take into account the half-year position for the current year. And it will feed into the budget setting report, which will be presented in January 2024. We take the opportunity as part of this update of the HRA business plan to update the assumptions that we have in there, many of them which are based on external factors outside of the council's control. We've reviewed the level of base inflation in the business plan. We've taken account of the pay award for the current year, which has now been agreed, and made some assumptions for future years at a level of 4% for 24-25 before returning to our previous 2% assumptions in pay increases from 25-26. We have increased the borrowing rates, which is something that we've seen over the last couple of iterations of this plan, sadly. We've seen some very significant increases in borrowing rates for investment in our new homes. So we now have a borrowing rate for the current year of just over 5%, dropping down to 4.78% next year, and then 4.08% before it settles at 3.8% on a long-term basis. This is higher than it has been long-term for a number of years in our financial plans, and we will review that again as part of the budget setting report that comes back to you in January, because these rates are moving on a daily basis. In the same way that borrowing rates have gone up, we are seeing improved rates on our investments. And so we've also reviewed the interest that we can earn on our investments. That has a smaller impact on our business plan than the borrowing. But we are assuming now a 5% interest rate for the current year, dropping to 4.5, 3, and then 2.5. And again, we'll keep that under review when we bring back the budget setting report in January. All of these changes move us to a position where we are recommending that we have a net savings target going forward for the housing revenue account, which is not something that we've had for a number of years. In recent years, we've had a savings target that has been completely offset by a strategic investment fund, so that any reduction in costs that we can identify can be reinvested into other areas of the housing business. In order to meet our commitments, we are suggesting as part of this iteration of the plan that we set a savings target at 4% of controllable expenditure, which is around about £196,000, but that we only allow 50% of that to be reinvested in new areas and deliver a net saving to the HRA to help us fund the new build programme and our current commitment to move all of our homes to EPC by 2035. Also in the report, we've built in the costs for the East Barnwell scheme, which was the subject of the report that we've just heard and approved. We have built in the funding for the Adiva Park scheme that was approved in September of this year. We've done rephasing and reallocation of the Decent Homes programme. So we've taken the latest information we have in relation to stock condition to update our Decent Homes investment. And we've rephased our new build programme over the 30-year life of the plan. In Appendix E, we've made some changes to budgets in the current year, and one of those has already been approved in September, which is to allow some abortive cost budget for some of our new build schemes where we're doing some work at risk. but also now some increased costs of voids in the current year, where we are still seeing a higher level of void numbers and an increased costs per void of our void properties. We did experience that last year, and we have seen a continuation of it this year. So we're including additional resource in the current year in order to ensure that we can improve those homes and re-let them at an appropriate standard. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody has on the report.
Thank you, Julia. I hope that's clarified a complicated report, which it usually does. Thank you. Now, questions? Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the excellent and important report. My question relates to maintenance and repairs. And I think we as a council could be doing better than we currently are in terms of when I talk to residents on the doorstep, I'm talking about residents living in social housing. They complain a lot about how long it takes to get repairs done and so on. And I'm wondering where I can find in this document some kind of evidence that this is a really important high priority item, that we can improve on our repair and maintenance of existing social housing.
Okay.
Julia, have you got a response? You're going to point it out?
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to say in response to that there isn't anything directly in this report that refers to give that actual clarity, because this is a financial report and not a report about the way we deliver our services. But we are currently, as part of our transformation programme, looking at the way our city operations team work and reviewing the services that we provide across our responsive and void repairs. So there is a lot of work being done across the council to ensure that we do deliver quality services to our tenants and improve on those on a continual basis. But I can't draw your attention to anything in this report specifically that would support that, as I say, because this is targeted at the finances and not at the service delivery.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification. And this is the first time I've looked at one of these documents since I was elected in May. So I'm learning still. Thank you.
And just to point out that there is a looking across the council at the moment, because we've got the new Social Housing Regulation Act, haven't we, that we have to respond to in terms of services delivered to tenants. And at the moment, the working parties are over the place, seeing how we're doing things, because we do, as a council, we as a tenants would always expect it, but as a council, we'll have to respond to a set of regulations set by the sort of social housing regulator, and that's really important that we get that the council gets its house in order to prove that it is delivering these services as they should be delivered. So that is a part of the reference you made, wasn't it, Julia, to looking at that generally, yeah? Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Holloway. Sorry, I'm missing people.
Thank you. So thank you for putting in the information about the rent increases, and I do support that. I think we do need to raise our rents by 7.7% this year, unfortunately, because we do need to make sure we're still on track with building as many homes as we can and getting those we have up to the EPCC standard. I just wondered if you could expand a bit on, there's some information on page 76 on how we support tenants, and in this case it would be those tenants whose rents aren't covered for them. And I just wondered if you could expand specifically for this year, when that rent increase comes in, will we be contacting everyone who might be affected, or specifically those who we have information about who we think might be worst off, or how will that work? And a separate question on page 72 about the actual rent versus the target rent. And this wasn't a concept I'd come across before, which is my own fault, but I was just interested to note that we can actually raise the rents back to the target rent when properties become void. So I just wondered how, given we've got this increasing number of voids, is that something that we're doing for quite a few properties now, and is that making a substantial difference to finances, or does it kind of balance out or get negated by the the voids and the costs associated with that anyway.
Okay, thank you. So in relation to the first question, we obviously provide a lot of information to our tenants around the support that is available to them financially. So as part of communicating any rent increase, we always remind tenants that they can access our financial inclusion service, and they can speak to dedicated officers to make sure that they are claiming all of the financial support that they're entitled to. So that offer will go out to all tenants as part of communicating the rent increase. We have a team of staff, the income management team and financial inclusion officers, as I say, who work with people on an ongoing basis to ensure that they get the help that they need. We can particularly target people through information that we have using software that we have as an organisation that helps us to identify specific residents that are, in certain income brackets or eligible for certain benefits that may therefore be eligible for housing benefit or universal credit. So it does allow us to be able to target specific individuals, but we will continually remind residents that that information and that help and support is out there for them. In relation to the current rents or actual rents versus target rents, rent restructuring was introduced back in 2002, and that produced a calculated rent for each property that was at that point well above what our tenants were paying. Tenants moved for a number of years from the actual rent that they were paying towards the target rent over about a 10-year period, and we weren't able to achieve getting our properties and our rentals up to the target rent for the property by then. The government then stopped the ability to move towards the target in the same way that had been allowed previously, and said that we could only move properties towards target rent when they were vacant, when they were void. We actively do that and have done that for a number of years. It is only a drip feed in relation to the number of tenants that aren't at target rent across the housing stock as a whole. We move a handful of properties to target rent each week. So maybe 2 or 3 properties a week that are moved when they're void, moved from their actual rent up to a target rent before they're re-let. So over a period of time, that obviously does improve our rental stream. But with the cost of the voids that we have at the moment, I would say that, we're spending more on the voids than we are able to recover over a number of years in the difference that we're able to put in that rent. So over time, it will improve our rental stream. But at the moment, with the cost of the voids, it's probably being more than offset by the cost of the voids.
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Samantha?
I was going to come in on the financial inclusion team that sit within one of my teams, but Julie has summed it up very succinctly already. The only thing I would add to that is that we did actually add an additional member of the team because of the cost of living crisis. So we have recognised that and the difficulties that our residents do face. So we have addressed that and an additional member of the team to help with that important work.
Could I ask, I'm going to be naughty, it's a supplementary kind of to what's been said, so I'm abusing my position as chair. About people in a lot of the new build properties are not at social rent, and they're going to be at the local housing allowance equivalent, etc. Have we seen any kind of trend there that people might be struggling? And of course, those people will if you're not on housing benefit or universal credit of paying your rent, then there will be the people in between, and they could well be hit quite significantly, probably by a large increase. That's number one. So it's all a bit supplementary. It's very naughty of me. And the other one was, we haven't got a guarantee until tomorrow that benefits, whether they're pensions or universal credit, and I think will be going out exactly in the same amount as inflation. So we could leave people could be more worse off from tomorrow than we thought they might be when you wrote the report. I think that's probably something we need to have a look at if people's going to have their certain things not uprated as much as they thought. I don't think they'll get away with it, but I think that's certainly been flagged up. Thank you.
So in relation to the new build properties, I don't have data to hand, I'm afraid, that would suggest that there is any difference in the ability to pay in our affordable rented homes compared to our social rented homes. We could certainly take that away and speak to colleagues and look at the data and come back to you with some information on that going forward. But it's not something I've got information to be able to share with you tonight. In relation to the pension increases, yes, we will need to wait and see what happens as part of the annual statement. But what we do need to remember, obviously, is that pensions were increased last year, and we did apply a rent increase last year that was significantly lower than the level of inflation and lower than the level that the government capped the rent increase at last year. And we need to consider the right decision for the Housing Revenue Account business plan in light of the commitment to improve the energy efficiency of homes, which obviously has the benefit of reducing tenants' energy bills. So there is a trade-off there for properties where we do that improvement in the energy efficiency, but also so that we can continue to deliver our new build programme. The other thing that we don't know, and I didn't mention in my introduction until the statement, is whether or not the government will introduce a cap on rent increases from April 2024. Last year, they introduced a cap at 7%. We've obviously assumed a 7.7% increase in line with the current rent standard in the report that's been presented tonight. But that may be overridden if the government were to introduce a cap at any level below that. And I'm sure they will consider that when they are considering what increases they apply to pensions. They recognise the two things are linked, and we don't know what will come out of that until we hear it.
Thank you. And I'd like to say we as tenants were very grateful that you didn't put the rents up as much as you could have done last year. It's been a bit helpful to see everyone through. Next person is Councillor Tong.
So, like Councillor Griffin, I'm quite new to the council, so there's a lot to learn with this sort of stuff. So I was just hoping to run some numbers by people to see if there's anything I've missed or if any of the numbers are slightly out of date. I would like to say that the business plan is amazing. It's been great to read. Thank you for that. So looking at page 9 of the business plan, which is actually on page 90 of the overall document, it seems like from the opening of 2013 to the closing of 2023, we've actually only had a net gain of around 113 properties, considering right to buy takes some out of the system, and also we lose some because of demolitions. So we're gaining an average of about 11.3 properties a year. Charitably, this is around a 2% gain. I think more accurately, it's around 1.53 or something, but I'll round it up because I'd like to be optimistic on this one. The most recent details I could find about actual applicant households for council housing was from the March 2023 report, which said that at the moment, it may be more now, 2,429 applicant households were looking for some sort of place. I've been told by council officers before that around 60% of people on HomeLink who are looking for a place, they're not out of a home, they're just looking for a home that suits their needs more. Either way, I think this is a large number and shows that a lot of people want to change their living situation because they don't have a house or a home that shows their needs. If you run these numbers then, it would currently take about 215 years if we were to build properties for all the people that are currently seeking a new place. I was just, those numbers I've given, is there any elaboration? Are there any updates on those numbers? Do you have any more accurate details?
Okay, thank you. In relation to the increase, yes, you're right. Over a number of years, the net increase in homes is relatively low. We have, over the last few years, had changes in some of the things that have affected right to buys. So there were some years where we had some significant levels of right to buy, where there was a threat of a policy called pay to stay that would mean that tenants with incomes over a certain level would need to move to pay a market rent. That caused a significant increase for a year or two in the level of right to buy sales, and so we lost more properties through that process than we normally do in any one year. And an awful lot of our new build homes in the last few years have been redevelopment of existing housing revenue account sites, which does mean that we have had to demolish some homes in order to deliver a net gain. Going forward, I think we will see a bigger increase in the number of net new homes that we deliver. We are bringing forward more sites where, for example, with the East Barnwell site that was introduced earlier in this meeting, where we're going to be delivering a net gain of 110 homes on that site. We have the Adiba Park site that was approved in September, which is a complete net gain to the council for all of the homes on that site. there are a number of other Section 106 type sites that are in the programme that will mean that we will deliver an increased number of homes as part of it. And as we go forward, fewer sites that are redevelopment of existing homes, where obviously, as I say, we lose a number before we deliver the replacement homes on the site. So there will always be some ups and downs in it, but I think over the last 10 years, you're right, there have been a number of examples where we've seen some reductions in homes in order to be able to deliver the increase. But Cambridge have built a lot more new homes than most other local authorities. So, you know, in comparison to what others have achieved, I think Cambridge City have done very well to outstrip the right to buys and be able to redevelop sites and still deliver a net increase in new homes.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Thank you for that information. I do want to say, of course, right to buy is a massive contributor to this problem. It is a little bit concerning that if a resident comes to me desperate for, a home that suits their needs, I may have to say that it will be their great-great-great-great-grandchildren that will eventually get it, but I understand.
I think the answer to that conundrum may be rest elsewhere as to why we haven't got as many homes as we would like to have generally. But I offer no political comment at all, of course. Right, Councillor Martinelli.
Thank you, Chair. Some interesting comments so far. I just want to ask a few questions about the report. So first on page 58, as part of the introduction, we talk about Cambridge having a net zero target of 2050, which isn't something I'd come across before. Just wondering, is that HRA specific policy for that date? And if so, how that interacts with the EPCC requirements, which are potentially a bigger issue. I'm also concerned about the gap in the rental income, which is primarily discussed on page 73. I'm assuming that if it was legislatively allowed, the plan would to catch up on essentially the lost rental increases from the sub-inflationary increase last year would be to increase its CPI plus 0.5% as long as that's allowable. Is that the case? That's sort of implied on page 125, I think. One other question I had was on page 92, we talk about essentially, we essentially talk about increasing the amount of market housing being delivered as part of redevelopments of sites. And what I wanted to know really was how this interacts with the idea of the HRA not being able to develop things as quote unquote investment primarily for yield, which is discussed on page 69. Essentially, what proportion of housing is allowable to be marketed or otherwise before you start worrying about this being classed as investment primarily for yield, if I've understood that as a concept correctly, and whether there's any policy on what we'd be aiming to do on that kind of going forward over the next decade. Particularly, obviously, as I say, as mentioned earlier, we've seen coming through this committee increasing variation of schemes put forward with more market competition to make the finances work, which I do understand, but is obviously a very different world to the one we've been operating in over the previous decade with devolution money. And then finally, obviously, the borrowing is the major feature of the MTFS. We're committing to over 400 million. Well, not committed to, we're suggesting over £400 million worth of borrowing over the next decade, over £500 million over the next 30 years. And as you mentioned in your introduction, interest rates are currently non-trivial. And I mean, it just strikes me that this is obviously not without risk. And I was wondering how this degree of borrowing compares to other similarly sized councils and HRAs. Is this something that's a commonplace level of borrowing? Or would this mark us as an outlier? Obviously, I appreciate that homes need to be built, but that this is, as I say, a different world to the world of devolution money. So I appreciate that's a lot of points, but I just wanted to give it all in one go rather than breaking it up.
Okay, I'll try and answer your questions in order. If I miss anything, apologies, and I'll come back to them. So in relation to the net zero carbon target of 2050, that is not a specific HRA target. That is a corporate council commitment to try and achieve net zero carbon by 2050. We don't currently have funding built into the business plan to be able to achieve net zero carbon across our housing stock by 2050. What we're looking to achieve at the moment with what we've got built in is the EPCC standard by 2035. There would be a lot further to go in order to move our housing stock to net zero carbon, particularly within that timescale. In terms of the decision around the rent increase for last year, we're not in a position where we're able to go back and replace what we lost last year in that way. So the rent standard allows us, which we're required to comply to, allows us to increase rents by up to CPI plus 1%, with September being the CPI that we need to use. So the 7.7% is the maximum that we can increase rents by next year. So we're not in a position where we can recover that difference. The only way we can recover that difference is when a property becomes void and we can move that property up to target rent, because the target rents have always gone up by the CPI plus 1. So they went up last year, for example, by the full 11.1% that was CPI plus 1 last year. So as we move a property to target rent, we can remedy that position, but we can't retrospectively apply a rent increase that we didn't apply last year. In relation to the market housing on new sites and the rules around investment for yield and the borrowing, the decision and the discretion is left with the Section 151 officer in any local authority to be able to demonstrate that they are not investing for yield. So if we are delivering a number of market homes on a new build HRA site in order to make the delivery of the HRA homes financially viable and affordable, then that would enable the Section 151 officer to make a clear argument that that investment wasn't primarily for yield. It wasn't done in order to generate a profit for the council or the housing revenue account. It was done to facilitate the delivery of the affordable housing. If we were to bring forward a scheme with 90 market homes and 10 rented homes on it, I think the Section 151 officer might have trouble, for example, in demonstrating that that wasn't primarily for yield, because you would be bringing in far more income in terms of profit on sales than you might be spending on delivering a tiny number of social rented or affordable rented homes. So as I say, it's down to the discretion of the Section 151 officer, but if we're delivering planning policy compliant affordable homes or above, then there's an argument that the market housing is being delivered in order to facilitate the affordable housing. From a borrowing perspective, I don't have comparisons. Again, it's something we could go away and look at for you. I don't have comparisons to hand as to the level of borrowing that other local authorities have in their business plans for new build going forward. I know that borrowing and the borrowing rates are challenging for other local authorities that we speak to. We're all facing exactly the same issues. But what I don't know is the magnitude of borrowing that others are including in their plans. As I said in response to an earlier question, I think Cambridge have moved at quite a pace in terms of delivering new homes within their HRA. And that probably means that, you know, we are borrowing, we're further ahead in terms of that need to borrow and the level of borrowing that we're looking at, because we have quite a challenging programme where we're trying to deliver as many homes as we can. We can certainly go away and explore what other local authorities have in their business plans, but I don't have any figures to hand for tonight.
Thank you, Julia. Can I just quick supplementary? Can you just remind us of the historic debt that the HRA, Housing Revenue Account, carries with it from being allowed to be self-financing or whatever it was,
Yeah,
how many was,
so
2012, that's significant, isn't it, yeah?
We currently have 213,572,000 of borrowing, which we were required to take out on the 28th of March 2012 in order to move into a self-financing environment. And that is built into our business plan, with the interest on that being in the region of 7.5 million a year. And we pay that interest on that, and our business plan assumes the interest payment on that, and currently assumes that we refinance that at the end of the term so that we can continue to reinvest money in new homes. So the need to support that is built into the business plan currently.
I think if you've come new to housing finance, it's always worth remembering that particular issue, isn't it? Thank you. Councillor Holloway? And Martinelli, yeah, okay.
Thank you. I was just going to respond actually to Councillor Tong's comments, which I think are very valid comments, and it's right to point out the fact that basically we're desperately building to try to just keep parity or just move ahead of parity because of right to buy and demolitions and other losses. I think Councillor Tong's point was slightly exaggerated just because there are a couple of things that your comments didn't necessarily take into account. So firstly, people do also move out of council houses sometimes, so it's not only through building new homes that we can free up houses for those on the housing needs register. It can also be people who move out, so that can free up space. Also, the band system, I suppose, is something important to take into account. So when you're talking to your residents, I suppose it would depend on what band they fell into, how likely they were to get a home quickly, wouldn't it?
So that's an observation, isn't it? And Councillor Martinelli, yeah?
Thank you. Yeah, so I just wanted to come back quickly. Thank you very much for the information. I think that's very helpful. So just regarding the net zero target, the corporate target that I'm aware of is 2030, unless I'm misremembering, and that's what certainly is plastered all over the website in various places. So I'm just trying to establish if we're looking at a different target from a corporate level here, or if that's just a typo. And then I guess my second point was yes, I appreciate about the borrowing that already sits with the HRA. I guess this is obviously still a significant increase in that, and I do take the point that Cambridge is further along this curve than many other local authorities. However, of course, as I mentioned, that was largely as a result of specific funding that the authority was given. And I guess my view is that this is a real paradigm shift in how the HRA is being managed. And I just wanted to, as a scrutineer, really be assured that this was within the realms of what we might expect to be doing for a council not in receipt of external funding to the tune of hundreds of millions. So I think, I don't think there's any rush, but it would be interesting from my point of view to know what other similar sized authorities are doing from a borrowing point of view. Thank you.
So Julie, you'll have a little look, will you, for that?
Yeah, so in response to those points, Chair, my understanding is that the 2050 target is a commitment to achieve net zero carbon in council buildings. I suppose what I need to go away and clarify is whether council buildings is referring to council operational buildings as opposed to council buildings as in council dwellings. And it might be that we need to refer to that slightly differently going forward if that is the case. So I will double check that. And in relation to the borrowing, I'll take away a commitment to look at what others are doing in their business plans, so that we've got some comparators going forward.
Thank you. And I believe Suzanne Hemingway would like to add something.
I was just going to clarify, because I've just checked it, that the target that the council set when it declared a climate emergency in 2019 was for our direct emissions to be net zero by 2030. You are correct. I'm not sure that we have clarified a specific target around our non-direct emissions from council homes, but we can just check back and make sure that the report is amended to clarify that.
If I remember rightly, Julia, there was a report when you actually estimated if we wanted to bring all the council homes up to decent, good standards, etc. It was getting on for £1 billion or something. We did everything we ought to do to retrofit and everything else. So it's a very difficult target. We'd love you to do it, but yes.
It was the costs were in excess of 500 million if we were to move all of our properties to net zero carbon, based upon some very early indications from some work that was done as a sort of desktop exercise. The net zero pilot that is being conducted at the moment, which is going to cover 50 homes, will give us much better information going forward as to what it actually costs to move our housing stock to net zero carbon when we've actually completed some on the ground, rather than looked at it as a hypothetical exercise. So as I say, it was over 500 million as a desktop exercise, and could well be more than that when we look at it in reality.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Scouring the room. No? Well, thank you. Well, we've got no more questions. Now we have to go to the complicated bit, yes? We've got the votes, so there'll need to be 2 votes taken in relation to this agenda item. So recommendations 2.1 and 2.2 on page 46 will be taken into part 1, so that means everyone can vote on it. And the other recommendations from 2.3 to 2.4 will be taken in part 2, which is councillors only. So I'll ask people's, are you okay taking them en masse? Well, there's two in the part 1 bits, 2.1 and 2.2. Can I just ask all those in favour of the recommendations?
That's 8 in favour, Chair.
Thank you. And anyone against? Abstentions?
3 abstentions, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, and now I'll ask the Executive Council for Housing and Homelessness whether she agrees with recommendations.
I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll pass over to Dinah, yes? Dinah. There's too many Dianes and Dinahs. Dinah, to take part 2, yes?
Thank you very much, Diana. So now we're looking at the recommendations under part 2 of the Housing Scrutiny Committee, which is for approving proposals for changes in the capital budgets. And this is point 23, point 24 and point 25, pages 46 and 47. So can I ask, please, everybody in... first of all, are you happy to take them en bloc? Yes? Thank you. So all those in favour, please.
6 in favour, Chair.
Those against?
None, Chair.
And abstentions?
3 abstentions, Chair.
So that recommendation is passed. So can I ask the Executive Councillor if you are happy to accept our recommendations?
I'm happy to accept, and thanks, Julia, for your hard work on this. Fantastic.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bird. So that now concludes the Housing Scrutiny Committee. I would like to thank officers for very thorough reports and for taking part and giving us this information, which has been really helpful, really clear. And to thank all members for your attention. So could members now please leave the chamber promptly and return any used glasses to the red tray in the hall. And could our meeting producer please end the live stream. And thank you all. Good night.